Hi, this is Janet Fitch, and if it's noon on Wednesday, noonish, on Wednesday, it is Writing Wednesday, where I answer your writing questions and questions about man, God, and the universe, whatever you're interested in. So, if you have any questions for me, feel free to put them in the comments. If you'd like me to design a Writing Wednesday around your question, write to me at on my website, janetfitchwrites.com, and then I can do a whole session on your question. My question for this week was about does about the imagination, the use of the imagination. Hold it, I gotta grab the file. What an idiot. Hold on. So this is my file. If anybody has written me a question, these are the questions that people have written to me since I've started doing this. I have some, 100-something videos now. Answering questions, everything from, doesn't matter if I proofread to, how do you find the meaning of your work? And I keep them just because I love them. So send me questions. I love it. So this is today's Writing Wednesday. The question is, does creative writing require a vivid imagination? Hi, Lewis. Looking forward to seeing you on this weekend. Oh, I'm teaching this weekend. I'm teaching a weekend intensive on writing dialogue in fiction writing. What makes it different, what makes it work. And I believe that the signups are still open. So it starts Friday night and then goes through Sunday night. So if anybody really wants to put pedal to the metal on dialogue, looks like there's still spaces. So through the communityofwriters.org. So yeah, imagination. Is it important to have, does creative writing require a vivid imagination? This is an interesting question. You'll be surprised. Linda, hi Linda, I don't think it's the most important thing in creative writing. Imagination is more important in some kinds of writing, some kinds of creative writing. I would say, oh, hi, Linda. Oh, good. You're going to be taking the dialogue. I don't want to say class because it's an intensive. I'm trying to back off of the idea of teacher and student since I taught with Pico Iyer a couple of years back, trying to think of it more as facilitating a process rather than teaching and all that stuff. Well, we'll see how we do. So imagination is, I would imagine, is most important in science fiction, in alternate realities, when you're creating whole worlds that don't exist. The imagination has to be pretty strong. But I don't think it's the first thing. I think that, those of you who've worked with me before know that, I put great store by William Carlos Williams' statement that observation is the first act of the imagination. And I feel that people, creative, you can tell like who's going to be a writer in a group of kids. It's generally the one who is really observant, who really notices the little things, notices pattern, notices, hey Chelsea, notices that it's, that the butterflies are starting to break out of the chrysalises, or they're the ones who notice, so and so looks sad, where the other kids don't even notice it. Um, Observation first. I taught a class of ninth graders several years ago, and we did poetry. And with poetry, it's about language. It's about the excitement of language and patterning of language and just like the song of it. I noticed that all of my kids could write poems in meter and verse, in form. They could all do the ballad. They could all do the blues. Almost all of them could do the sonnet. They could do, they could work with a scheme. Once it was free verse, there was a certain drop off. Certain kids just, they didn't have anything to say. They looked at the free verse and it was just like you could give them a prompt that would help, but they just couldn't take it very far. So maybe you could say that was a failure of imagination, but sometimes it's the support of form is really helpful, because it forces the imagination to come up with something. I gotta find something that rhymes with, ability. That also makes sense and is fun, at least with 13-year-olds. Form helps the imagination. Observation, once you get into, once we got into creative writing, once we got into fiction, there was another big drop off. And I think the ability to closely observe is the first act, is the first thing. I send them out to observe, make a list of sounds that you're hearing, for 10 minutes. Go to the market and look at what the person in front of you, or your mom, because they work for kids, look what they've got in their basket and look at them and see if you can tell us something about them. Give them a name. What would their name be? Are they married? Are they single? Do they have, see, it's a little bit of a synaptic leap. Then you observe something and then you make the little leap of who is this? What can you imagine about their lives? And it doesn't take like a blistering imagination. I mean, you don't have to be, some amazing master of the imagination to make a little leap. You see this guy in work clothes buying 2-gallon jugs of water and a couple of roast chickens, chips, and you're seeing a guy on a work site who's getting lunch for the crew. I mean, and then you can name him and you can look at how old he is. It's like, is this guy married or not? He's 23. I don't think he's married. What's his name? Who is he working with? What are they working on? Does he seem to be enjoying the little break he's getting by going to the market? Or does he feel resentful that he's the lowest man on the totem pole, so they're sending him out to get the food? Maybe he botched something that day. And it's just like, oh, go get lunch, And then you start making up stories, but you observe first. And you don't have to make too much of a leap. Well, there were kids who couldn't make the leap at all. I had one boy who actually could, he could do the poetry, the formal poetry, the rhyme and meter. He was really able to do that. He couldn't do the free verse very well. All of his reference were comic books. He could get a little ways, but then he kind of ran out of what he knew about to talk about. He was adrift in this part. He was somebody, his observation was okay. He observed a woman, kids can't guess ages. He observed a woman wearing a denim skirt with a sheet cake and 24 juice boxes in her cart. And he couldn't make the leap that this was a woman getting ready for a birthday party. This was a mom preparing for a birthday party. So this is not going to be a writer. This is not going to be a writer. This is probably going to be an engineer. I'm sure that's what happened with him. Which is not to say engineers can't have an imagination. Many an engineer. My father was a fabulous reader of fiction and very open to the arts, and probably would have been a fabulous writer. But that guy was not gonna go that far. But it was fun for him. But you have to be able to look at, to go out and look at people and observe them, observe things about them. What do we know about them? Are they married? Are they single? Where do they live? What is their house like? What do they do for a living? And make those little leaps, make little leaps of, what you're seeing. And it doesn't matter if you're right or not. It just matters that you're able to make the synaptic leap into an interior life, that this person isn't just a cardboard figure getting in your way when you're trying to pay for your groceries. It gives the you have to see people as each person has a whole world going on. That's why people who dismiss other people tend not to be the best writers. They can be kind of caricaturists, where other people are sort of the butts of their joke, and they go through. But to be a good fiction writer, you need it's imagination, it's empathy, and it's understanding that first and foremost, that there is a world going on inside of each person that you see. Not every old lady is the same sitting on a park bench. Each of them are going to be very different. That's why I don't like to make broad judgments about groups of people in our politically polarized time, that they're all a bunch of blanks, because they aren't. They can have some similar traits that you find really annoying, dangerous, and what have you, but each of them has their own reason. Each of them got there in their own way. So once you kind of accept how different people are, that each of them has their own world inside, then observation jumps pretty easily to imagination, because you're imagining a real world where real people have real problems. They really do go to a job. They are either married or they're not. They're either happy in love or they're not. Making those little jumps from the guy buying the chickens to a guy buying chickens for a job site. Some people can't make that leap. They just can't. They don't really see people as real. They see themselves like this kid in his cartoon world. He lived very much in his imagination, but it wasn't an active imagination. It was an imagination he entered. He took up the Marvel universe, and it supplied him the content, the imaginative content. So is that an imaginative person or not? He can he has the ability to live in a fantasy world, which he did, um, but he could not create an imaginative world. If he created an imaginative world, it was a direct quote from one of his favorite Marvel comics. Um, I mean, I'm not criticizing him. He had no intention of being a writer, but we do. So, staying curious, you know, and challenging yourself to make speculations about people based on what you're seeing. Um, that is more important than imagination, is the ability to observe with curiosity. I'd say that's the writer. Um, and then we have to, master the skills to get that information on the page. But this is, my mother used to, I mean, this is how I became a writer, is one of the reasons, one of the ways I became a writer, is my mother would take me on trips to the bank or out to lunch or something. And she would just point to somebody and say, tell me about that person. You know, what do they do for a living? Are they married? What's their name? And I just jumped in. It's like, oh, okay, this is, Marvin Cohen, and he's an accountant, and he's married, his wife is really mean to him. He, likes to do this, and this, and just start making up a story. Is that imagination? I think it's the excitement of the idea that of people's inner lives. And it's not that, it doesn't require that much of imagination. I will say I don't think I have much of an imagination. What I have is observation and a deep appreciation of the inner life of other people and the deep reality of other people, and kind of a more empathetic sense of I could be like that. If things had played out differently, I could have been up there with the big sign, and the gun across my body. It's like, if I had grown up in a different place, a different kind of family, I could see it. I don't think these people are so bizarre. I think that they are human, and in different circumstances, that's very Dostoevsky, everybody is capable of everything. So we have to be, nurturing of those circumstances. That's life, though. Let's talk about fiction, So if you are a human, you observe your own reactions to things. You can imagine yourself into the life of another human. Is that imagination, or is that just empathy? Lewis said, do you remember any of the stories you told your mother? No, but I'd get into it. I'd just go on because she kept asking me questions. Oh, yeah, I created whole worlds of people. That's a fun thing to do. If, as a writer, if you're ever stuck somewhere, pick somebody in line at the bank, or pick somebody, buying kombucha, and make a story about them. Just, what do they do for a living that they can, have, hang out at the coffee shop at 2 in the afternoon? What do they do for a living that they can do this, or, are they fired, or are they ill, or, make it, be curious. So curiosity, I think, is more important than imagination. Tremendous curiosity. The kid who could not figure out that the woman buying a sheet cake and 24 boxes of juices was a mom getting ready for a birthday party. his curiosity about other people was zipperoni. Um, and I think that unfortunately a lot of people, should I say, it's getting worse. Who's to say? Life is complex and there are a lot of people, but people seem to be less able to look at other people and be, at least be curious about them. At least recognize that this is another world. That person has another world inside them. I do see people less and less curious about, then more and more addicted to entertainment, but just looking around them and looking at the very real people and real objects and real weather and real reality around them, they don't even look at it. They don't even notice, don't look up. I do my morning walk in a very beautiful on a very beautiful street with huge trees. I just do it it's my version of the forest bath that the Japanese talk about. And there's some people, that smile and nod, people you see, and some people don't even notice you're there. I know that they know I'm there because they manage not to smash into me. They manage to move around me. So they know that physically I exist, but no interest in meeting another person's eyes. People are have become very purposeful, and it's kind of a soullessness, unable to recognize another person. Um, yeah, they're out there. I don't think they're readers. I don't. I think that that's one thing that you can count on about readers is they are interested in other people. But they need to look up. They need to look up and look at the real world too. So here's a question. What better than to imagine another life? That's right, the inner lives of others. That does seem to be what fiction is about. And that's why, it's of concern that people often prefer to read, preponderance of nonfiction, that people are afraid to encounter the inner life of other people. It seems like kind of quicksandy. It's like, oh, I never read fiction. I only read nonfiction. It has to be true. And it's like, oh, you think that that's true, do you? That it is also somebody's construct, and somebody is deciding, making choices of what to pull in and what to bring out, and fiction art teaches us to recognize the humanity of other people and the amazing, astonishing worlds that are inside people. And people are funny. They'll watch a bunch of TV, but the idea of looking at a book of fiction is frightening to them. Truth is stranger than fiction. Yeah, I'll say that the anomalies happen in life because there are things that you would not buy on the page. Like the coincidences. You get a coincidence in the beginning. You get like one coincidence in a novel, but that's it, unless it's about coincidence and fate. I think that observation of truth is the beginnings of the imagination. But you need your imagination when the task in fiction is to avoid telling people what they expect, giving people what they expect. So it's saying, okay, the expected thing here is to, somebody comes across this guy that they knew in high school, and we're having them having the meal together. Um, and what we're expecting is to see them like, hmm, I'm single. How about you? Yeah, I got a divorce a couple of years ago. So we're expecting that. Maybe they end up talking about Wittgenstein and then getting in a fight, or um, a secret that comes out. That so giving people what they're not expecting does require imagination, because we're people too, and we tend to, the first thing we'll think of is the thing that everybody will think of. Um, and as in all things writing, you're avoiding the cliche. You're avoiding the thing that 99 out of 100 people would say, oh, this is what's going to happen next. And then you have to go, yeah, that's why that's not going to happen. That's why, people are going to want to read my book and stay in there, because they'll learn to trust that what they expect to happen isn't what's going to happen, that I'm going to pull something else out of some other rabbit out of the hat. So that's a trust. I think that some writers are terrifically imaginative. People who create new forms. People in avant-garde writing, the imagination is incredible. Read Calvino, read Borges. But Borges writes very short stories, so he doesn't have to maintain those worlds over 100 pages, 200 pages. Often the most imaginative writers write short fiction, because it's hard to sustain. Lincoln in the Bardo, the George Saunders, he's a short story writer. He wrote a novel about Lincoln talking to dead people, a whole novel. That's having to sustain some imagination. The what if is where the imagination comes in. What if, Lincoln could talk to his dead son? What if, Martin Amos's Time's Arrow is a tale told backward in time. The imagination to sustain that, that's really powerful stuff. And often the imagination comes from creating new forms. In avant-garde writing, it's that's a special kind of imagination. So Susan says, I'm finding it more challenging to write a third-person short story than a first-person story told within the protagonist's head. How do you convey the same depth from third-person perspective in a short story? Okay, well, the short story, point of view. So we're talking about point of view. First person is, I am the camera and I only see what the character can see, like this. But I can't see the character. People always, the first stories will be stories told in the first person. That's what kids do. I did this, I did this, I did this. The third person pulls the camera back just a little bit. You can have third person, a close third that is almost first person, where we can know everything. We can only see what the protagonist sees. But you can use language that you can't really use in first person unless, often you can use an elevated language, but if the person is not, say, an educated person, third is easier to use a wider range of vocabulary. So it has to do with voice. First person is very voicey. You can do like tour de force in voice, Third is going to be if you're doing a close third, you're, you're also going to be within the protagonist's head, but you'll be able to step back just a little bit more, see a little bit more. What I do to work on this is to take a piece of fiction like a paragraph, that's written in a voicey first person, and put it in third, and see what you lose and what you gain. And then do the other way around. Take something that is in third person and put it in first. And what do you gain and what do you lose? So it is a little more challenging to write in a third person because you're unhooking yourself a little bit more from the character. And that gives you a little distance. And sometimes that is a rich thing to do. Sometimes by unhooking your consciousness a bit from the character, you see the character more clearly and what they need to do. And, you're shaping it more. You're more in control rather than just following I. It gets your face out of the carpet a little bit more sometimes. A lot of writers change the person as a way of refreshing their eyes. I mean, they'll take a chapter that, they've been writing in first person, they kind of feel depleted. They might write a chapter in third, and just to get a little bit more of a look around. Sometimes you'll take a draft and you'll do a whole draft in third person. You'll take it, and you learn things. Sometimes you learn things in third and then put it back in first, and you have all kinds of new information that you wouldn't have had otherwise. So that's a great question. You can convey the same depth from a third person perspective. Often it depends on if your present tense, first person present tense is you are in the moment all the time. There's very little sense of past and future. You're having to react to every moment. There's no pulling back and noticing a larger pattern. So beginner writers, first person present tense, you're going to see it all the time because that's the way children tell a story. When you have more control, or you try to practice a little more control of your medium, take a look at past tense, take a look at the other person. What else can I tell you? What else would you like to know about? I did get a request to talk about subtext in dialogue, but because I'm going to be teaching this big dialogue class this weekend, I've decided to just give that dialogue a rest. But I'll come back to that later, maybe next week. So any other questions you have about dialogue? Dialogue, imagination, person, whatever you've been working on. Feel free to ask me anything. I'm here for you. But yeah, stay curious. Stay curious about other people, not just on the page, but out in real reality. Here's a question. From Linda, what constitutes what's the rest? A coincidence versus a well-imagined scene. A coincidence can be in a well-imagined scene. There's something called Deus ex machina, which means the God on the machine, because in Greek theater, they make these incredible problems, family problems, generational problems, I mean, really deep problems. And then they didn't know how to solve the problem that they created. So what they did was they put a god on a crank, and they lowered the god onto stage, and then the god told everybody what they needed to do, um, and solve the problem. And the Greeks eventually decided, probably Aristotle, my guess, it could have been anybody, but they realized that that was cheating. Well, it's cheating, you know, that you have to solve the problem on the terms on which you laid the problem out. Um, so the gods caused the problems, and the gods are the only ones who could solve it. But as humanism developed, it's like, no, you have to play it out the way, you have to play it as it lays, as Joan Didion would say. You've created this vicious family, and stuff is revealed, and then, the tragic end. Somebody escapes, Medea escapes, I believe, and Oedipus blinds himself and goes wandering. You can't just have the god come down and solve the problem. So coincidence, I don't mind a coincidence in the beginning of a story. Some weird little thing that then fuels the story as it goes along. I happen to have run into, what's the beginning there's a Graham Greene, is it The Heart of the Matter, where he runs into somebody he knew from before the war, in a square, and he had been involved with the man's wife. And it's like, so you get that coincidence of running into somebody. But if you can't have too many coincidences, because it shows the author's thumb on the scale. You've created a world where certain things are happening. The coincidence is just like, oh, they needed that to happen, and they couldn't figure out how to happen it naturally. So, oh, what a surprise. My long lost daughter shows up. It's like, have her show up at the beginning and make it that part of the problem, or have the character look for that daughter and find her. Jeff says half of the fun is spending 4 to 7 days figuring out how to make a coincidence not a coincidence, but a believable inevitability. Yes, that is well said. If you have to have something happen, don't make it a raw coincidence. I'm looking for that person, or I see that person, I don't interact with them, I just see them. You have to figure out how to make it so that people like me and Aristotle aren't saying, the author's thumb is on the scale there. It's lazy, and it's cop out. That's the truth versus fiction thing that we were talking about earlier. Is the Ruthie was saying truth is stranger than fiction. Yeah, is that there are all kinds of coincidences in real life, but the reader in fiction, the reader goes, I don't believe that. That's a construct. Somebody stuck that in there because they were too lazy to make it actually happen. Believability. Yeah. Things have to happen in a way. And every novel is its own moral universe, its own physical universe. If you're going to have a world in which, and this is why science fiction requires more imagination than people in the world that we actually recognize, is you've set up new rules. and then you're watching them conform to those rules. If you have a world in which there's no gravity, then you can't put something on a table. You know, coincidence. I think that how much imagination does it take to do, say, historical? I was doing historical fiction, but historical fiction isn't made up. It describes a real world that really existed with, you know, lives of people who actually people did live at that time, and they lived in a certain way, and these things are discoverable. Um, Often the imagination in historical fiction is imagining what people didn't have, what they didn't think about, you know. Uh, Imagining is closely based on research. Imagine what my character thought reading that headline, from 1917 Pravda. What did she think? But there was a 1917 Pravda, and maybe based on all my research, I have to make up a headline, but it's going to be an appropriate headline based on observation of facts. Um, there's always going to be, there often is going to be some coincidence to as to bring the story in, because stories will continue to turn out and expand, expand, expand. And at some point, you need the opposite force. I forget which is centrifugal and centrifugal, but it's the force that pulls together. If you're going to have a coincidence, it can't solve the problem. If it solves a problem, your reader is going to be pissed. What else can I tell you about imagination? How do I improve my imagination? Okay. I'd say the exercise of looking at people and telling their story, making up a story about them is a really good imaginative exercise. What if one thing was different? My husband writes short stories, and he's extremely imaginative. And he'll think, what if there was one thing different about our world, then how would that play out? And almost all of his short stories are like that. There's like one thing that's not the same. And then everything else has to be extremely our world, or it doesn't really work. Imagination is usually based in fiction. It's usually based on it comes out of sensual reality. You just learn the questions to ask. It's like, I had a student who was writing a World War I novel, and he had no sense of smell. I didn't know that. I wrote on his pages, what does it smell like? I mean, you've got to do the physical reality, of a location. And this is war. And what does it smell like? And he said, well, actually, I don't have a sense of smell. So then he had to do it imaginatively, which is to ask yourself questions. Okay, I don't have a sense of smell, but if I did, what in this scene would have a smell? What do they burn? What do they cook? Are there animals? What do they smell like? How about saddles, leather smell? They cook over campfires, so smoke. There's blood. What does that smell like? What does it smell like? Well, you're not going to go, cut your arm off so you can smell it. But there are ways to see what blood smells like. Probably getting a steak or something like that might be a better move, or go to a butcher shop, and just hang out. Um, it would smell like animals, so what do animals smell like? He would have to do it imaginatively. And so he gets his evidence together and extrapolates. So we more extrapolate than imagine, except in sci-fi, in which case those people have amazing imaginations. But human beings tend to be human beings. They don't tend to be, emotionally or mentally any different than us. Kathleen is saying the Nextdoor app has loads of possibilities for characters. Oh my God, yes, they do. And you look at that and then you extrapolate. Okay, this guy, we don't know how old he is. Guess how old he is. Guess if he's married. Guess what his place looks like. Guess what his neighbors think of him. Guess what his kids think of him. That'd be very fun. A very fun thing to do. And then also comments. If you look at, if you can bear to read the comments in Twitter, and then go and look at those people and then make up a story about them. Very interesting. Jeff says that app, Nextdoor, is bananas out here in Charlotte, North Carolina. Oh my God. Oh my God. There's a writer named Todd Goldberg. Anybody want to follow him on Twitter or on social media? Is a very funny writer, mystery writer. And he gets into it with the people, and he lives in the desert, and he gets into it with the people on Nextdoor. He's always saying what they said and what he said, and a better man than I, man. I'll run from those people in real life. But imaginatively, or in terms of writing, it's very interesting. What are they afraid of? What are they so afraid of? So, well, it seems like we've gone over the imagination questions. Anybody else have any question about imagination? How to train the imagination more? It's observation. I think that it's easier to imagine once you're investigating something than it is to just lie on the couch and imagine a whole world. I can't do it. I start with a character that I can sort of see based on observation of lots of human beings over many years, and somebody comes together with their little clutch of traits, and I have to imagine more of them. I have to imagine what I don't know about them. Character formation is definitely a place where you base imagination on observation, even things you don't even remember that you knew. But I keep my writer's notebooks, and I'm always looking at people and writing up what I see of them, what I know, what I've observed about them. Then those are people I can always use in my fiction. So anyway, I want to thank you for joining me on Writing Wednesday. I am, if you are interested in looking at the archive, I've put it up on YouTube, Janet Fitch's Writing Wednesday, so you can, it's easier to search. And if you want to subscribe, just subscribe, and then you'll get a notification when I post more stuff. So Dialogue for Fiction Writers starts on Friday night, and if you are interested, I think there's still time. I think you can register today and still be part of that. That's going to be intense. So happy days, and enjoy your life. Okay, bye.